This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, back by popular demand, Stephen Coughlin, the author of the new book, Catastrophic Failure. And Stephen is joining us tonight to discuss how the rules of engagement are getting American soldiers killed in Afghanistan. Stephen Coughlin, welcome back to the Glazov Gang.
Thank you for having me.
What a powerful, what a disturbing section of your book, Stephen. I mean, I already knew more or less, but some of these details just really upset me. And let's get to them. Let you just start. Introduce this terrible issue to our viewers.
Well, I think one of the things that often bothered me is when I would watch TV, the mainstream news media, or I'd even be on Capitol Hill talking to members of Congress, they would always have a general or someone from the high levels of the government talking about how the war was going. And yet I often thought, especially the members of Congress, why don't you ask the captains, the majors, and the NCOs who are in your district who are leaving and talking about how they're believing the ROE is getting them killed and that they're losing confidence in their leadership for it. How come that's the question that never gets asked? And of course, what I start off with is the fact that the military there basically came to the conclusion that the thoughts and feelings of the Afghan public was the center of gravity, meaning our number one thing to resolve, and that our number one mission was to make them like the Afghan government. Well, first of all, that's not even a mission that the United States or its military is even prepared to undertake. But the second part of it is that as an Islamic Republic, because we wrote the Constitution of Afghanistan that declared an Islamic Republic, it would mean that if he was in charge, if the president of Afghanistan was in charge of the ROE, and he was, it would mean that those ROEs would have to conform to what Islamic law would have them mean. And in a sense, I argue that the green on blue situation we have seen in Afghanistan conforms to that, because it is entirely possible that we could make the Afghan population have a higher level of trust in the Afghan government by being permissive of such green on blue attacks. And I think we've seen that. And I think we've seen that our side has come up with rationales that have actually gotten to the point of blaming our soldiers for their own murders. It's an outrage.
Okay, Stephen, let's get to some of the details here, because what is so infuriating is that, first of all, you've demonstrated how the Muslim Brotherhood is actually shaping American foreign policy. Now we understand that somehow Americans are operating under Islamic law in Afghanistan, which means that the kafir's life is less of value than the Muslim's life. So all of this plays a role in it. Now look, there are no night or surprise searches. You have to warn villagers before searches. You have to have Afghans accompany U.S. searches on your searches. U.S. soldiers are disallowed from firing at an enemy unless the enemy is preparing to fire first. Disallowing U.S. engagement with the enemy if civilians are present. Yes, troops can fire at a terrorist if he's placing an IED, but not if the terrorist is walking away from an area where bombs have been placed. And this is just crazy stuff.
It's not just this crazy stuff. It's a morale buster. I think at the time I wrote the book, we had some statistics that said that the suicide rate among our special forces people was higher than they're killed in combat. And I think that all you have to do is look at what you said and put your mind in a tactical environment. It means that we have to take casualties before we can engage the enemy. We can't engage the enemy until the enemy has actually engaged us. That means that there's a decision made that it has been accepted that we take casualties as a condition of engaging the enemy. That takes proactivity right out the window. And I think when you talk to the troops on the ground, what you're hearing them say is when they have had to work with their Afghan partners, it doesn't surprise them that nothing is found. It makes in one sense, since we have gone to these regimens, the casualty rates in Afghanistan have skyrocketed. Well, that's exactly what you'd expect to see.
Well, and Stephen, sorry, but now in your book you document this over 70% of the more than 2,000 American deaths in Afghanistan have occurred after the rules of engagement were implemented. 70%. And this is after Obama took power. And overall here, what's happening is the objective is to minimize Afghan casualties and to accept greater American casualties. How can any American president, how can any leaders of America allow a situation where American girls and boys are dying at greater numbers because of these rules?
It is beyond me. And you know what? I actually asked that question with senior military leaders. I think somewhere in that book, I got hold of a survey where they asked West Point graduates what they thought about the military leadership, and military graduates starting in 1988, going through 2004. And they had some off-the-chart statistics saying that at the end of the day, they thought that our promotion system in the officer corps to who gets to become general is one of the greatest threats to national security we face. And I think that's what we're seeing. We don't have people generals today, it seems, that would stand up and say, no, this is not right. And what we'll hear some schmoozy, smarmy answer that sounds good on a 5-minute TV bite on the news that leaves out that, well, you know, when you said that they had to be preparing to fire, that meant that in all probability they probably are already under fire. You see what I'm saying? That's me receiving fire.
Stephen, so overall, as you show in Catastrophic Failure, the jihadists in Afghanistan now know everything about American soldiers and what they plan to do ahead of time. I mean, this is just crazy. And you write that surviving families of killed service members tell of their loved ones worrying that it was the constraints under which they fought that would get them killed, not the enemy. In other words, the American soldiers are not even worried about the Taliban and Al-Qaeda as much as they're worrying about the constraints that they're operating under.
Yes, in a more than one situation, do we have records of soldiers writing home saying exactly that? They're saying they can handle the enemy, they can't handle the rules of engagement, where they ended up getting killed. And so I think this is something that's very real. I think that the troops know that. I think that that flows into the whole green on blue situation, where you're in a situation where you can't even be armed, in a situation where we know that some of our troops get killed.
Okay, Stephen, Obama is the commander-in-chief, and they update him on the situation all the time. Let me just say this. If you and I were in a room, and it was up to us, and somebody came in and said, Stephen and Jamie, look, ever since these rules have been put into place in 2009, I think it is, we've suffered 70% of our casualties since that time. And American boys and girls are dying because of these rules. And if we keep this policy and rule book in place, they will continue to die in higher numbers. What do? Can you imagine you and I saying, yeah, just keep it going. Keep the rules going. We would in a blink of an eye say, American lives come first, scrap these rules. That's half a question and half a little bit of a tirade. I think what I'm asking you, Stephen, is what's in the mind of a commander-in-chief that allows this to keep going on?
Well, I have to say, first of all, I don't think that President Obama has any awareness or understanding of how militaries operate. So I think it's an abstraction for him. And I think that that's a problem, because I don't think that he really cares to get too down into those type of details. I have to say that I also wonder about all those Republicans in oversight committees who aren't asking those hard questions as well. Or how about the generals who are executing those orders? I think that it's a disgrace. I think it's a disgrace because at the same time we started executing those ROEs, I think people started to realize that this war is not going to turn out successful, and we're already seeing that. And if you go talk to people who are high-ranking, they'll tell you that winning and losing isn't the way you measure wars like this. Well, I think that if you're going to have your son or daughter fight this war, your husband or wife, and you can't even articulate a win-loss criteria, what the heck are you doing? So yes, I think that I would ask, why are we still there? What are we doing? What is the definition of success? Because you see, to do that you would have to define the enemy. And in defining the enemy, you would have to acknowledge it has to do with something of them being declared jihadis, looking to fight jihad in the cause of Allah according to Islamic law. By the way, and we wrote a constitution that subordinated Karzai to that understanding. So I think that we're in a situation right now where we're fighting a war where we've locked ourselves in a box. And yet we continue the war.
Stephen, our time is up. This is just a disgrace. And thank you for shining a light on it. Thank you for shining a light on the American boys and girls that are dying needlessly, and nobody's talking about it except heroes like you that are telling the truth. And hopefully, because of truth tellers like you, soon so many people will become upset that something will be done about this. Stephen Coughlin, thank you for joining the Glazov Gang.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Viewers of the Glazov Gang, you have to get Stephen Coughlin's book, Catastrophic Failure, and read it. And we'll see you on the next edition of the Glazov Gang. Good night.